It's been about a week since I posted my video about the experience I had with ChatGPT and creating a 3D network visualizer. Posted that, and it did pretty well. Took me a day to do that, and then it took me a couple extra hours the next morning to actually create a website out of that, post it, and I can't wait to get a domain name associated with that so I can make it public. I have continued to work on it, because if you saw my 3D network visualizer, what it does is put all these nodes per their subnet in different areas, and I was able to add a concept of a group to them, and then I was like, I want to add a sphere around the different groups, which makes sense because these could be networks all over the world and they're different segments, and you want to see what the groups look like. And I thought, oh, I can do that in like an hour, but it didn't turn out that way. Now I did get it working, and this is where I am so far. And it's been quite an experience. I haven't gotten quite as far. Today I'd like to talk to you about a few of the frustrations, limitations that I have run into along the way. First of all, the exceeded your quota error limit. Wow, okay, that is frustrating because a lot of times you're trying to repost the code, asking ChatGPT questions about it, and you just run out of questions, tokens, whatever it is they count. And it's interesting. You don't have to wait a day. You have to wait a couple hours. But it's not so bad. They bump you down to ChatGPT 3.5 instead of 4. So you have to work with the dumb AI. Second is, well, just the something went wrong. You don't even know what it is. You're just cruising along, asking questions, posting code. At that point, you pretty much have to reload. So there's certain errors where you just keep going. Like luckily with the exceeded quota, you get bumped down and you keep going. It doesn't lose its context. But speaking of losing its context, the third one is just amnesia, right? I've heard about this. I've seen people have called it hallucinations. In my case, you're cruising along, it's, and maybe you've been going for hours, maybe even days, and I don't know what happens, but there's just so much in there that it starts writing code that has nothing to do with what we were working on. And, I like, are you feeling okay? And then ultimately I just have to start over and post, my original question, the code that I had, and then go from there. And that's kind of frustrating, but that's okay too. And here's one that was really frustrating, especially as a programmer. The program started out really small, but it grew very quickly. And at some point I could not feed it back in. So, you're asking questions, and I've already talked about it getting confused, things like that. And you're like, okay, well, here's the code again. At some point you can't give it all the code. So there's two problems with that. One, you can't give it all the code because it's just too much. And the other is, when it wants to give you all the code back, here's a modified version of your code. If it's too big, it'll just stop. And I'm like, finish. And sometimes it will finish. Other times it will try to spit out the whole thing again. Then we get stuck in this loop. And then what you have to learn how to do is say, don't give me the whole code, just give me the modifications. Which works, but then you get chunks of code and then you start asking, okay, where do I put this code? So that one's pretty tough to deal with. It's not so bad for me now, but I can imagine, what if it's a million lines of code? I think everything changes at that point and you're just dealing with smaller functions, but I'm still working with that learning curve. Hey, what's wrong with my shoulder? Just notice that. You probably noticed that too. I rode my mountain bike off a cliff on purpose because that's fun. Jumping was doing just fine. And then my back tire clipped the edge of it and I flipped over, and it was a long way down and I landed on my shoulder. It didn't break, but it looks kind of funny now. Finally, well, no, there's one more, but just the going in circles sometimes. you'll say, hey, this isn't working right. And it's like, oh, I apologize. Try this. So you try that. And then you say, nope, that didn't work. And then it'll apologize again. And then it'll say, try this. And it'll be the thing that it tried before. So sometimes you go in circles like that. And I think part of that, and I've come a long way, learning how to change the questions just a little bit, like to break it out of that loop or get it to think out of a box, just like you would with a human being. And luckily it can do that. Some human beings can't. Finally, the biggest problem, and this is the greatest problem, I guess it depends on your personality, is just how addicting it is. I haven't eaten much, but that's okay. Fasting is good. I normally eat quite a bit, but I haven't stopped to eat. I get up first thing in the morning with new ideas about questions about how to make progress on that, on what I was trying to do. I mean, next thing you know, it's 9 or 10 at night. I am getting good sleep because that's important. But, eating, I haven't been doing a lot of that. So definitely addicting, but in, an amazing, intellectual, nerdy, programmy, geeky kind of way. Those are the kinds of things that I've run into so far. Can't wait to see what kind of challenges I run into next week. Thanks. Talk to you soon. Bye.